how can you move like an NFL athlete with that power, with that explosiveness? How can you be more athletic? Ladies and gentlemen, this is the Garage Gym Athlete Podcast. I'm Jerred Moon, and I was recently having a conversation with someone about how to be more explosive and why that matters. But the reality, coming back to the question, how do you move more like an NFL athlete, be powerful like them? In all honesty, if you want to move exactly like an NFL athlete and be just as powerful, some of us might need to go back in time and get a different mom and a different dad and different genetics to be able to be at that level. So I'm not going to tell you exactly how you can be an NFL athlete, but I'm going to tell you how you can be more powerful and why that matters in today's podcast. When I was in the military, I was at this training camp and they had an outside fitness instructor. It wasn't just like a military instructor. They had brought in a different organization to come train us in strength and conditioning. And I remember one of the things that we were doing were these bounding broad jumps. And I have always been really good at jumping, just kind of naturally. But then my training dramatically escalated that in my 20s because I was doing all the right power-based training to be able to jump. And so going back to this training in the military, we were doing these bounding broad jumps, and my broad jumps were covering like twice the distance of trainees next to me. It got to the point where the instructor stopped us and came and asked me, and he's like, "What do you do for training? Like, how are you able to jump like that?" Now, I don't quite have the hops like I used to, still, enough to impress my 12-year-old and my 10-year-old when I jump over things or do really high box jumps and stuff. But I want to talk about the pros and cons of this training and ultimately how to pursue it more, because it is like a superpower when you can jump and you're explosive and you're powerful. Now, why would you want to add have this trait, this ability to move powerfully and explosive? Well, this, in my opinion, is what's missing in a lot of training programs today, is this power-based training. There are ways to do it safely. I'm going to talk about some of the cons, but there are ways to do it safely. And I think the reason most training programs are avoiding anything that's power-based is because the risk of injury is higher when you start doing the things that are required to generate more power. So I think that's the only reason it's not in most programs, is because there is an injury element that people are scared of. I'm going to talk about how to avoid that. But that is the biggest con, because to become more powerful, you are going to have to lift some heavy things. You're going to have to do some jumps. You're going to have to do all these things that typically, if done with poor form or too much weight, or the combination of poor form and too much weight, you can end up hurting yourself, okay? I know I've hurt myself with heavy weights over the years, off and on. I've talked about it on this podcast. So to me, that's not a problem. To me, that is the price I pay for doing the thing that I love. I'm going to get some bumps, some bruises, some scrapes, but the fact that I'm not going to work through those things, I'm going to rehabilitate them completely and then come back in a different way is my approach. Now, if you want to start adding these things to your training, and you want to be more powerful, more explosive, because you want to maintain that athleticism, you want that edge, you want all that comes with it, increased testosterone, all these things that come with more power-based training, here's how you do it. There are three main ways you can do it. But if you want to think about power just conceptually for a minute, because again, I like to go conceptual when I'm giving these kind of things so people can just start to think about whether or not they are actually doing something. Power is an actual equation, okay? It's an actual equation in physics. So power equals work divided by time. So basically, if you can do work faster, that's more power. You're creating more power. So if we go just straight to lifting, if I'm lifting 500 pounds off the floor from a deadlift, 500 pounds, but it's one of those slow, ugly lifts, and it takes me 5 to 7 seconds to get to the lockout at the top. That's a certain level of power, right? That's work, 500 pounds divided by time, 7 seconds, right? But if we wanted to go faster, 500 pounds, and say I'm just like, 500 pounds is nothing for me, I'm super powerful athlete, I'm explosive, and I lift it in 1 second, I have generated way more power. Even though athlete 1 and athlete 2 are lifting the same amount of weight, there's way more power when you're doing things faster. So now if you just start to think about your own training, anytime you can do something faster, you are generating more power. It doesn't always have to be more weight. It could just be faster. It could be actually very lightweight and faster. So we'll talk about the 3 ways to do that. The first, you do need to lift heavy things. You do need to lift heavy things. Heavy weights are essential for generating power. I think the ability to lift a heavy load is kind of the prerequisite to being able to jump high, be explosive, have all that power. You have to lift heavy things. I typically recommend lifting heavy things with a barbell and doing deadlifts, squats, presses, bench press, those kind of things. Just having it somewhere as a base of training, like we do in Garage Gym Athlete. We're always including those things somewhere in the program. The second thing you need to do is you need to lift fast. So if we're, like I just talked about conceptually, how you need to be faster, but you need to lift fast. And we typically prescribe that through dynamic efforts. So lifting a lighter load, but for speed, quality and speed. So if we're talking about, something taken from Westside Barbell, like 10 sets of 2 reps at 30% of your 1 rep max, this can be on the deadlift, this could be on the bench press, this could be on the squat. So you're taking 30% of your 1 rep max, right? Not very heavy. You're only doing 2 reps, 3 reps, but you're doing it for speed. You're being super explosive. That's not a type of training a lot of people do, but when you do that, I've even seen people do very light, like very, very light weights, jump with barbells on their back. And they are very explosive athletes, the athletes who are able to do this. And that's all they're doing. They're just lifting a load, but they're decreasing the time. So the faster you can be with lifting a load, the more power you're going to be. So the problem that most people think is that you need really heavy weights really fast, when that's not very easy to do, or even moderate loads as fast as you can. And that's still kind of in that injury zone to me. It's like, all right, I'm going to do 70%, 60% of my 1 rep max. I'm going to go as fast as I can, but you're still not able to be that fast because you haven't generated that power. So let's just back it way, way down and just go fast with 30%, 10%, 5%, just the bar, just a light kettlebell, something like that. If you can start moving those loads faster, you will start to generate power. Now, the last thing, without any weight required, is just jumping. The ability to jump is like the definition of power. So broad jumps, tuck jumps, any kind of jump that you can get, just, jumping as high as you can, any kind of jumping thrown into your programming, which we do a lot of. It typically is called plyometrics, but plyometrics opens a whole can of worms. So I'm just going to say jumping. So the more jumping you can add into your daily routine, the reason I say jumping as opposed to like plyometric with your upper body or anything is because the hips are everything when it comes to generating power and being explosive as an athlete and maintaining these things throughout your life. So if you do those 3 things, you make sure that you have some base of heavy lifting, not lifting heavy all the time, but you have a base of there, you have this base of strength, and you're able to do those lifts. You are working on fast lifts safely. You're moving loads quickly, and you're doing that safely with perfect form, super light loads. We already discussed all that. And then if you're jumping, if you're doing all 3 of those things, you're going to be an incredibly explosive and powerful athlete. It's going to make you more athletic. It's going to make you who you really want to be, because my problem with some training programs these days is it has athletes trying to combine all this stuff, like running in a straight line for 40 miles per week, and then some barbell training. And maybe you look okay, but I know you don't feel okay. I know the athletes are doing that. They don't feel okay. They're not very mobile. They're not truly athletic. They couldn't probably play a sport, but they can run in a straight line really far, really fast, and they can lift some weights. But to me, that's not who you want to be. You want to be athletic. You want to be able to play pickleball without being injured, or go play, a game of pickup basketball, these kind of things without injury, and to be truly athletic. So these are some ways that you can add some power to your training and reasons that you'd want to. But I'm gonna cut it off right here. For all of our athletes who are experiencing this training, we appreciate you. I'm implementing all these things into our programming as is. If you are new here and you want to find out about power-based training, how we combine all these different methods, go over to garagegymathlete.com, sign up for a free trial, and we would love to have you. Remember, if you don't kill comfort,